what, in my opinion, is a lot of Hollywood, right? A lot of Hollywood. So what we see as Americans from Hollywood is, movies like The Boiler Room, The Wolf of Wall Street, Wall Street, and the list goes on. And in most of those movies, money is viewed as the root of all evil, like you said, right? It's the bad guy. It's corrupting people. And money can absolutely corrupt people. There's no question about it. In the same way that eating fast food every day, 3 times a day, can corrupt your body, right? It can make you unhealthy. So I think it's important that, just like anything else in life, we view it in moderation.
No label to find me, fam. What's going on? It's your man Nathan, and I'm super excited for today's episode of No Label Live. I've got my friend Kurt Mueller, who is a certified financial planner with Apollon Wealth Management Group and the host of the Flip podcast. So that's Financial and Leadership Intelligence with Purpose. So first off, what does that stand for, and how do you bring about helping entrepreneurs fulfill their legacy, my friend?
Love it. So there's a lot to talk about there. We'll start with Flip. So as you mentioned, it's the Financial and Leadership Intelligence with Purpose podcast, and my approach to it is very similar to our mutual friend Heather Parody's approach to life, and it's very unconventional. So I recognize that there is a lot of parallels, a lot of similarities between leadership and financial planning, and I also felt like the best financially sound people that I know also have a tremendous and a very powerful purpose. So that's where the idea came from, and I also wanted to have a little something where a little play on words, flip your mindset, flip your life, that kind of a thing. So that's on that front. And I'll let you fire away with the next question.
Yeah, so just in hearing that, I'm curious what you've learned through being a host for your show that maybe somebody's come on and they've kind of, through conversation, flipped a perspective that you had up until the point that you guys had a conversation.
So I think that's a great question. I think it's more, I'll just speak, broad level, generally speaking, from a, flipping your mindset standpoint, money's an interesting thing, right? Financial planning is an interesting thing. If you really look at, humans as a species, our brains are designed to do one thing and one thing only, and that's keep us alive, survival. Our brains also tend to be very lazy. We like to recognize patterns. And so when it comes to financial planning and budgeting and money, that's a very complex issue, and it's hard for a lot of people to talk about it. And I think that's in large part due to the fact that just as a species, our brains are lazy. We just flat out are not we're not wired that well to think about those types of things. We are also, as you know, very emotional creatures. We are emotional human beings that sometimes make logical decisions. We're not logical human beings that sometimes make emotional decisions. We're emotional creatures. And so money is a very emotional thing. And unfortunately, what I've seen is that, the financial services industry, the financial planning industry tends to be so focused on the logistics, on the practicalities, on the numbers side, which is important, no doubt, but there's not a whole lot of attention paid to the emotional side, the behavioral side, the mindset when it comes to money, when it comes to financial planning. And so that, in my opinion, is a huge opportunity for me anyway, to help people understand why they make the decisions they make around money.
So when you think of money through the lens of a label, right? If I say money is, what's the next thing that comes to mind for you? Because when I hear that, automatically I think of things like the saying, money is the root of all evil, uh, money is bad, things like that come to mind that we hear over time. But when I say money is for you, what comes to mind?
Freedom. Money is freedom. And so I don't, I agree with what you said. Money is the root of all evil. And most people would have similar responses to that. I think anything is the root of all evil if you abuse it and if it's not done in moderation. I could sit around and eat cake all day, and that's totally fine. But if I eat 7 or 8 pieces of cake every day, I'm going to be 400 pounds and not very healthy, right? And so cake could be the root of all evil because I don't use it in moderation. So I think money is freedom in the sense that having wealth, having money provides you options. And those options, typically one of those options is going to be freedom, not being tied down to a 9 to 5, the ability to, go and hang out with your kids or family, friends, loved ones, etc. So I think it's important just from a label standpoint that we try not to only focus on what, in my opinion, is a lot of Hollywood, right? A lot of Hollywood. So what we see as Americans from Hollywood is, movies like The Boiler Room, The Wolf of Wall Street, Wall Street, and the list goes on. And in most of those movies, money is viewed as the root of all evil, like you said, right? It's the bad guy. It's corrupting people, and money can absolutely corrupt people. There's no question about it. In the same way that eating fast food every day, 3 times a day, can corrupt your body, right? It can make you unhealthy. So I think it's important that, just like anything else in life, we view it in moderation.
Mm. So if we view it in moderation, and you talked about how as human beings we're emotional creatures, how can we begin to harness the energy of money to make sound decisions for our survival?
Great question. I think it comes down to one word: awareness. Awareness, and I'll explain. So scientifically, from a science standpoint, when we buy something, if I buy something on Amazon or I buy something at the store, our brains release dopamine. Dopamine's the feel-good drug, makes us feel great, makes us happy. So if we are going through struggles like everyone goes through, and we find that, I feel really good every time I go on Amazon on my phone and I start buying with one click, right? So Amazon knows what they're doing. They're very smart.
Yeah.
I mean, they are playing to our weaknesses as human beings because they know that we get dopamine every time we click it. It's super easy. We don't even have to see cash. And it shows up on our front doorstep in 2 days. So they know that. So I go back to awareness. By becoming more aware of what is going on with yourself psychologically, chemically in your brain, it will allow you to create what I call speed bumps. And what I mean by that is, if we think of the human brain, the human brain likes to create these expressways. We like to recognize patterns. And so if we're feeling down in the dumps for whatever reason, or maybe we're having a bad day or whatever it may be, and we have built a habit of going on Amazon, clicking, that makes us feel good, our brain has built that expressway. So it's being lazy. It's saying, hey, I feel bad. I want to feel good. Okay, go buy something. So if we are more aware of that, then all of a sudden what begins to develop is we begin to develop speed bumps so that it slows us down in the express lane, right? So so that we can say, wait a minute. I know that I'm buying that because it makes me feel good, but do I really need it? And the answer to that is probably no. There's not a whole lot of needs in this world that people have a problem buying, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of wants. And so I think just being proactive, understanding how the human brain works, understanding what's going on in your own brain when you get that impulse to buy something, I think is where it all starts. And I'm not saying, this is not something to where you're going to go from a spender to a saver overnight. It's just like anything else, right? If you're trying to learn how to play the guitar, you're going to sit there and practice in the same way that you would practice, in real life circumstances, just becoming more aware and saying, wait a minute, okay, now I know what's going on. I'm not going to buy that, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I'm curious for you, what's the first time or an example of something that you created for yourself that's a speed bump for you?
So I think, great question. So in addition to being more aware, I think it also goes back to one very important thing, and that is your purpose. That is your purpose in life. We talk about it a lot, in the UL group, but I think it's really important that you can connect your purpose to your awareness. And here's an example. Same scenario. You had a bad day. You pick up your phone, which is easy to do. Click on the Amazon app. You start scrolling. You don't need anything, but you start scrolling, right? If you've got a very strong purpose in your life and what you want to accomplish and what your legacy wants to be, and you're aware of what's going on psychologically, those two combined really create what I call that suit of armor over you to deflect the figurative arrows that are coming at you, whether it be your phone, social media, TV, radio, etc. Make no mistake about it. The marketers in this country know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. And so I think if you can say, look, my purpose, my legacy is to, leave the world a better place and to raise two wonderful boys to give back to the world. All right. Then in a real life scenario, if I'm about to buy something, I'm going, okay, well, is this helping me accomplish my purpose? And the chances are it's probably no, right? So it's that combination of being aware, but also having a very strong tie to your purpose.
Got it. And if I'm somebody who's sitting here and so far I'm still freaked out about this money conversation, even from the standpoint of what we've talked about in a lot of generalities, and hearing the word certified financial planner, I'm like, oh, I've never even thought about having somebody for financial planning. How can we help somebody kind of get over that fear of approaching someone to talk about their money today? Like, what can we do to get somebody to say, oh, Kurt's just a dude who knows a lot about money, how it works, and wants to help me fulfill my purpose? What can we do to kind of help people see that as a good thing and it's something that's available for them?
I think it comes down to education. It comes down to helping people understand that the traditional way that they may be familiar with the financial planning industry doesn't mean that everyone in that industry acts that way, right? Mm-hmm. In the same way that we would say, not every UL has the same leadership traits, has the same philosophies, etc. And so from my side, it's part of my duty, part of my obligation is to make sure I'm educating people on these various different concepts, educating not only from the standpoint of, we talked about the science behind why we do what we do, the effect that money has on the brain, etc., but also what it truly means. What is a certified financial planner, right? Because the word, in fact, I did a post about this yesterday, the word financial planner gets thrown around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But the only one that really matters, in my opinion, and granted I'm biased, is certified financial planner, because that way you're talking to someone that has taken the time from their family, from their business, from their friends to study and learn, which amounts to about a 2 to 3 year process, and then sit for a 7-hour comprehensive exam and pass it. So now, does that mean that every CFP, certified financial planner, does that mean that every CFP is good? No. In the same way that just because someone has MD behind their name doesn't mean they're a great doctor, right?
Yeah.
So the answer to your question is, from my side, it's education. Education, education, education. And the way I do that personally is through social media. Now, of course, COVID has changed a lot of that in the past, seminars and dinners. Now, I never did any of that, but there are some in my industry that's the approach they use. I personally don't think it's very efficient. So from my side, it's education. Now, from the other person's side, they need to stand in front of the mirror, figuratively speaking, or literally, whatever helps them, and really, really have a tough conversation with themselves about whether or not they're ready to go down this road, because not everybody is ready. In the same way, a good analogy I can think of is, personal training. If you wanted to get in shape, eat better, chances are it'd be a good idea you go hire a personal trainer. Well, not everybody's ready for that. Something has to propel them to be ready for that. And frankly, there's nothing that I can say or do that is going to speed up that process of that person becoming ready. In fact, I think it's counterintuitive. If I try to speed up that process, then I believe that actually works against me. It works against them, because now they're forcing the issue, right?
Yeah.
And so they have to be mentally ready to go down this road, because ultimately, here's what we find. Most people in this world are smart. They don't need me or anybody else to tell them, hey, stop going on Amazon all the time. Stop going to Starbucks. They know that. They know that. But for whatever reason, they're not doing it, right? And so it's drilling down to, okay, well, why are we not doing that? What are some of the money habits that you learned as a child? Oftentimes it goes back to that as well. And that's one of the things. If I know that I'm talking to someone who's a big spender, chances are their parents were big spenders. And they never learned how to handle money. And what they saw was, well, we just throw caution to the wind and we just spend like there's no tomorrow. So I think it's drilling down into that as well. But the initial conversation, I often say, that's the hardest part. The hardest part from a client's perspective is picking up the phone or sending a message to say, hey, I'd like to schedule a time to have a discussion with you. That's the hardest part. Because mentally, what they're really saying is, look, I can't do this alone. Because if they could do it alone, why even call me? You know what I mean? So they're vulnerable, right? We talk a lot about, I know you talk about vulnerability quite a bit. That's a very vulnerable moment for them. Yeah. And so it's easy for me to sit back and go, well, golly, give me a call. What are you waiting for? But from their side, that's like, I might as well just ask them to run a marathon. It's a big ask. And so I think it's twofold. I think it's education from the financial professional side. And then I think it's from the client side, I think it's having that conversation in the mirror and really, just being real with yourself about whether or not you're ready. Because ultimately, one of the biggest things that people don't want to do is they don't want to make sacrifices.
Yeah.
And I don't know many people that wake up in the morning and say, I can't wait to be vulnerable today, and I can't wait to make a ton of sacrifices, and I can't wait to be rejected. I don't know many people that say that, right?
Yeah, no.
So, but that's to answer your question. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah, it made me think of if I'm somebody who knows I want better habits, because I don't want to say I have bad habits. Let's just say they want to have better habits. What's one thing that you would recommend that's an easy step to get started? Like, let's say you're talking to somebody who I'm a blank slate about money. I have no concept. I know what it does and I know what it is, but I have no concept of how to um, plan to use it. What are some strategies you would give me if I was a blank slate?
So I like to keep things simple, right? Kiss, keep it simple, stupid. This is what I would literally do. I get a legal pad. And I would sit there and I would write out all your monthly bills, everything you spend money on, and what your monthly income is. That's one of the hardest things to do is put it in writing. It could be on a legal pad, it could be in an Excel spreadsheet, whatever floats your boat. But the first thing to do is put it in writing. There's something magical about putting that down on paper and seeing it and going, oh my God, I'm spending how much on Amazon? I'm spending how much on Starbucks? I'm spending whatever it may be, fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
So now you've got it written down, which is the big first step. And then the second step to follow that up is to say, you know what? I am going to write savings on my cash flow statement as if it is a bill, as if I'm paying my mortgage or my rent or my car payment. Treat it like a bill. And what that does over time is it builds that habit of saving first, spending second. Warren Buffett has a famous quote. He says, I'm probably going to butcher this, but he says, don't invest what's left after spending, save first. Anyway, I'm butchering the quote, but you kind of get the context of it. The whole idea, though, is to create that habit of saving first, spending second. And I go back to what we talked about earlier in the show, moderation, right? So you don't want to be on opposite ends of the spectrum, because I have some clients, I have to tell them it's okay to spend money.
Yeah.
So you can be on that end of the spectrum where you're not enjoying life. You have all this money, but you've never enjoyed it. And last I checked, you can't take it with you when you die. Last I checked. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got people that just say, hey, throw caution to the wind. I want to go on vacation. I'm going to put it on a credit card. Why not? I like to come somewhere in the middle. Where can we get to the middle and find that balance? But I think it's just to kind of put a bow on it. I think the very first thing, as I said, getting it on paper and writing in savings as a bill and doing it. You do that for 90 days, now you've established a habit. And at that point, it's on autopilot.
Yeah, I think there's something about the writing, taking it out of the brain and making it something that you can physically see in front of you. It makes it more real when you do that. And when you were talking about the two different spectrums of people, I was thinking how I'm sure that, and we touched on it a little bit, that life experience for the person who just likes to save, 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 it was a huge point of their life experience to say, well, I need to save in case I don't have something happens and it takes it all away. And that made me think of people who may have had family members who have gone through the Great Depression and things like that. So they're like, well, I know I've been told what happens when we go through things like this. And I'm sure a lot of people now in the circumstances we're in are going through similar kind of stories of, well, we're in rough times right now. So a lot of money mindsets are being shaped here and now today, for sure.
That's exactly right. That's a great point. And one thing we haven't really, um, you know, dove into too much, but yeah, your upbringing has a lot to do with your money beliefs. It absolutely does, and it can be good or bad, right? And so that goes back to your question earlier about, well, how do I even start? How do I get how do I get the courage, the guts to make that call or send a message? And a lot of times it goes back to their childhood experiences and their just view on money. So I can. It's interesting because in my role, for whatever reason, to be totally candid, people feel like they have to impress me with their numbers, right? Um, and it's interesting to me because the wealthiest people I work with, you would never know it if you met them on the street.
Yeah.
Average Joe. And the folks that I'm working with that have mountains of debt are the ones that are, to use a social media term, flexing, right? But all their cars are leased. They're 3 months behind on their mortgage payment. They can't pay the tuition at the private school. And it's amazing to me, that just the dichotomy between those two. And so, there's an old saying, and I think it's dead on the money, is that those that have a lot of money typically won't show it, and those that don't will show off. So it goes back to that whole, like you said, the upbringing and how they form those values and thoughts.
What do you think creates that? Because when I think of those two individuals and those two avatars, I think that there's somewhere a need to be seen is not being met, and so the people who are flexing, right, and realistically are in debt, and um, there's some sort of insecurity around money and the meaning that money, like you said, a lot of people want to impress you. Money is tied to their value as a person. So how do we help people start to realize that, just from my perspective, money is a tool, and me having lots of money has nothing to do with my actual intrinsic value as a person?
So you brought up a great point, I think, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, ultimately is getting them to understand that money is a tool to accomplish a much greater purpose, a greater mission in life, whatever it may be. And I also think I do think to some degree that social media has really, what's the word I'm looking for, perpetuated this whole image, this fascination, or in some cases obsession with image, right? Image, 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 image. I think social media has really ramped that up even more so than it was. But it's from a behavioral standpoint, it's helping them to understand that money is simply a tool to allow them to accomplish something greater in life. And secondly, it's also, and this was a hard pill for me to swallow, right? Because if you'd have met me 6, 7 years ago, I was the guy that was flexing. I was the guy buying expensive suits and this, that, and the other. And image was a big deal to me, right? Now I'm the guy that wears a polo and shorts. So we evolve and we change, right? But what helped me is I just realized that at the end of the day, all of this stuff that I was buying has an expiration date. In other words, yeah, it's fun. It feels great when you buy new stuff, but you know what? A week or two later, I want something else new. So I realized that, and when you really stop and think about that, you're like, well, do I really need all this stuff? Can I be using my money for a greater purpose? And to your point about insecurities, I absolutely 100% agree with you. I think that a lot of the stuff we see with image and flexing and whatnot can go back to deeper issues, right? Psychologically, some sort of insecurities around that, and they're like I said, in some cases, obsession to impress their peer group and others.
Yeah, that want to impress people is it's so powerful, and anybody who's listening or watching that hasn't seen the Social Dilemma, I would recommend checking that out, because that does a great job of showing how we're kind of set up to see that every day. And like we've touched on here several times, the people marketing to us know exactly what they're doing to have that cycle repeat itself. I've got a couple more questions. What's got you excited as we head into the last quarter and into 2021? That feels crazy just to say.
It does. It does. A couple of things. On a lighter note, I'll be glad when the election's over. So that'll be good. I'm excited for that. But I think, seriously, what's got me excited from an economic recovery standpoint, because I'm kind of a nerd. I do like to really study economic recovery and how well we are doing. I think as we progress through the election and into 2020, hopefully we see a vaccine. Hopefully we see an end to the COVID-19 pandemic, so that everybody can go back to a quote unquote some sort of normal and just get back to, again, the way of life. Well, I don't think we're ever going to go back to how it used to be, but close to it. Let's put it that way. From just an educational standpoint, I'm studying right now for another designation, the Certified Private Wealth Advisor. So I'll be sitting for that exam in December. So assuming I do what I need to do, I'll pass and have that feather to put in my cap, so to speak. And lastly, I would say, as these quarters tick by, and as the days on the calendar tick by, from an industry standpoint, there's a huge vacuum being created right now, because we've got this dilemma where we've got a lot of there's not a lot of young advisors like myself. I'm 37, which is young, by the way, in my industry, because I think the industry average is like early 60s. So what's happening is a lot of those advisors are retiring, but there's no one to replace them. So that's got me excited, simply from a business standpoint, because I think there's just more opportunity to take market share. But those are the three big ones, I would say, going into the fourth quarter, and then as far as the first quarter goes.
I think that's so interesting, just the fact that you're talking about there are so many people in your industry that are getting ready to retire, and they're at that stage of their career. So there's room for new up and coming planners to take leadership roles, because I see that from my perspective in people who talk about disabilities and advocate for individuals with disabilities. There's a huge gap between the people who started all the way back in civil rights. They're all getting ready to leave, and then there's a huge gap between me, who's 35, and those guys. And I think that's what's cool about that, is it creates new ideas and new thoughts to kind of lead into a new era, so to say.
That's exactly right. What's the word? It's we're constantly evolving.
Yeah. So if somebody's watched or listened and they want to get connected with you, where can they best do that?
The best way would be social media, Facebook, Kurt Mueller. I'm also on Instagram at Finance Architect. My cell phone number is on every social media profile I have. So it's the only cell phone I have. So you can also call or text me. And I do, I make it a point to make sure that folks understand I offer complimentary initial consultations. Really, I use that as a time to get to know that person better, just hear, their background, what their money beliefs are, how they form that way, what their expectations are, of someone like myself. So again, it's a time for us to, I call it more of a discovery meeting. It's a time for us to get acquainted and really just see if philosophically, we align, because I'm not right for everybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the final question I've got for you is, what does no label defines me mean to you?
Ooh, that's a good one. I guess I'm super simple in my thinking. I just, one word comes to mind when I hear that phrase, and that's unconventional. I hate to keep using that word, but that's the first word that comes to mind when you just ask me that question. And I usually, what they say, usually the first thing that pops up is the
Yeah.
is the one that you should articulate. So to me, that means that you're simply being unconventional. Like, for example, in your case, it's, you could accept the label of I'm disabled and just live out your life and not, try to make a greater impact. In my case, I could simply accept the label of, well, all financial advisors, all financial planners are, just stuffy and they wear red ties and white shirts, and, you need to have a bunch of money to go talk to them. I could accept that label, right? The other label is I could accept the label that, well, you can't really do any sort of social media. You can't really do any marketing on social media. I can accept that, but I don't. So, but I think, like I said, to answer your question, I think the biggest word that comes to mind is unconventional.
Yeah, and I want to leave the audience with this. I hope that this conversation that we've had here today around money has been unconventional, and it's made you think in different ways than you're used to thinking about money. I'd love to see that you guys, if you take Kurt's advice and you sit down and you write out your plan on that legal pad or whatever piece of paper it is for you. If you do that, I'd love to hear about it, and I'm sure Kurt would as well. And with that, guys, make sure and share this episode out, because, look, a lot of times people don't like to talk about money. And guess what? You didn't have to talk about it today. You just have the joy of listening and letting it soak in that way, getting a new education, a new perspective of looking at this. And somebody in your life deserves to hear this too. So share it out, and remember to lead, love, and listen. Lead yourself to lead others. Love yourself so you can love others, and listen to yourself so you can listen to others. And with that, we will see you next Friday for another episode of No Label Live.